For our eagle, we'll start with placement of the eye by drawing a line slanting downwards, then a U shape underneath, or you can draw through to show the top of the eye and only darken the bottom part of the eye. Drawing through is a technique that can help you make good shapes like circles for eyes and keep them accurate. We'll draw another circle in the center of the eye and then complete the corners of the eye. We can erase any drawing through that we did now that the eye is complete. Measure from the front to the back of the eye and leave at least that much space before starting the beak area. Let's sketch a squared off area to start the beak and a curved area above for the head. See how much space I'm leaving around the eye to get realistic proportions. One eye space to where we're going to start the beak, and at least 2 or even 3 eye spaces to the back of the head. We're using the eye to measure because that's what we drew first, so we can use it as a good measuring tool. Using the eye as a measure, take that space and go 1 eye forward for the beak. Then we'll begin curving down. So keep the top straight, then curve down for the front of the beak. The curve down will be at least 2 lengths of the eye if you measure with your fingers. Then we'll bring that beak back up in a curving triangle shape. It will not stay narrow all the way to the top. Now it will suddenly curve downward, almost like a little shallow tooth, then come straight back under the eye for the mouth. The bottom of the beak will be above the point of the top of the beak, so it will start more than halfway up and curve out and back and around. Then we'll have a feathery chin area for the bottom of the eagle's face. The back of the neck will just be a large arc outward. We can add in a feathery shape now, or add that in later with our details. At this point, we can start adding more details. The front of the beak, for example, changes color here, about 1/3 of the way down the beak. Then we have a nostril area, which is an arc, and then almost an ear shape. Above the eye, there is a fold that almost looks like an eyebrow. And then there is a space around the eye as well. Once these are all in place, we can begin shading and adding the feather texture. For example, we can use our pencils to shade in the center of the eye, and using the side of the pencil, we can lightly shade in around the eye. We do not want this shading to be as dark. You can also use different types of pencils. For example, I could have used a pencil called HB to do the outline and a 2B to start shading in. These letters and numbers tell you how hard or bold and soft the pencil is. With this started, the eye is in place. We can add details later, such as lines radiating out from the center. We can even use the eraser to streak lines out from the center or add highlights. But let's move on for now to some of the feather textures. When drawing feathers, you don't want to draw every single one. It will look artificial, like scales. It will just look strange. But sometimes feathers are different colors. This golden eagle has stripy feathers on the top of the head and shorter, darker feathers towards the beak. Then the feathers lighten as they go backwards along the head. So I'll block in some of those longer, stripy feathers at first that are a bit darker. The ones under the chin are a bit darker, not only because of the color of the feathers being dark brown, but because being under the chin and away from the light that's coming from the right, they are more shaded. So we can block in some quick curving shapes on the front to let us know where there will be layer after layer of feathers. And then we can just shade in the whole thing with the side of the pencil or a lighter pencil to give us that shadow area before moving on. It's important to lay in the areas of light and shadow right away, because you may spend a lot of time on details and then realize that all your details are going to be shaded out because, for example, they're under the chin, under the belly, or in a shaded part of the animal or person that you're drawing. So it's best to look first for your areas of shadow, because you may not add many details at all to these areas. So now that I've shaded the front, I can look at the beak. Inside of the nostril, it will be dark, and then the beak itself will be shaded away from the light, so the front curve of the beak, and also shaded a bit because the tip of the beak is darker. So we'll have some shading due to color change, and some simply because that part of the beak is in shadow. The next thing you can do is add some more shading underneath that sort of eyebrow structure onto the eye itself and directly on the bottom. You can add shading to the front area of the eye and then gradually lighten it going backwards. For this area and back, we're not going to shade it in completely, but we will indicate some feather shapes with curving lines going outward. It's important for feather or fur to follow the direction of the feather furry growth. So in this case, I'm sweeping the feathers backward, and as I go down the bird, they're starting to move downward and get a bit larger. Feathers grow in rows, so I'm working in rows to establish feathers that are orderly instead of a huge mess of shapes. I've lightly shaded the beak area, and underneath each of the large feather shapes in back, I'm adding a little bit of shading. When you're shading feathers that are lighter, you're actually going to be shading the spaces between them, not the feathers at all. Once you have all these shaded, you can use your finger, a piece of tissue, or a blending stump to blend and shade the pencil together. A blending stump is a good tool if you don't want to use your fingers or tissue to blend in the pencil that you've created on your drawing. You can see here it blends in the different pencil areas, leaving some light and some dark. You don't want to overblend and make everything exactly the same. So you may want to blend some of the darker areas and then gradually pull it into the lighter areas. So you can see I'm doing the darker areas between the feathers and then pulling that lightly with a lighter pressure into the lighter areas. Anything that you see you want to darken a little bit that got blended too much, you can go back in with your pencil and darken that down. Or you can blend a little bit more or use your eraser if there's certain points that you want to lighten up. For example, if you'd like to lighten up the tops of some of the feathers to make them stand out, you can use a regular eraser or a kneaded eraser to bring those out a little bit more. If you like the way it looks, then you're done. If not, just keep playing around with a little bit of an eraser, a little bit of a pencil, and see where you get. Thank you so much, and I'll see you next time.